Ted Mosby and Joe Goldberg are more similar than you'd think. Remove the laugh track and you'll find that a lot of Ted's behaviors are just as disturbing as Joe's. The instinct might be to call me extreme, but before you do, walk with me a little. Hi everybody, welcome to Mind and More, where we talk about anything that comes to mind and more. Today, I'm going to compare Ted Mosby from How I Met Your Mother with Joe Goldberg from You. Sure, I completely understand the vibes of these shows are different, but there's remarkable similarities in the main characters' personalities. Ted might not have been unaliving people, but he was definitely breaking hearts. And apart from both being handsome, dark-haired men who are often excused for their bad behaviors, they have a lot more in common. What is the point of this comparison, you may wonder? Well, there's no other point than to just show you that a lot of the behaviors that are played for laughs when it comes to Ted are just as dangerous as those portrayed in Joe.
And also, what if I'm onto something and they're actually twins separated at birth?
Number one, they're both stalkers. Ted's stalking behavior is often downplayed in How I Met Your Mother. But think about it. In season 1, he steals a blue French horn for Robin on their first date, then shows up at her apartment completely uninvited. He tracks down women from minimal information, like how he tracked down Victoria, even though she'd made it clear she just wanted them to have that one night and nothing more. With Stella, she'd said she wouldn't date him because he was her patient, and she thought it was unethical. But he pursues her relentlessly and even pitches up at her workplace uninvited for a 2-minute date. He also shows up uninvited to a student's apartment to ask her out, even though she could lose her scholarship and he could lose his job. This all sounds romantic, but could actually be scary if you think about it happening in the real world. Let's remember that at this point, these women barely know Ted, and there aren't many people who would be comfortable with grand gestures of love from strangers, without it feeling strange. Moreover, the icing on the stalker cake is Ted is in the habit of orchestrating accidental run-ins with love interests. Now, when it comes to Joe, Joe's stalking is the central premise of You. He follows Beck throughout New York, watches her through windows, breaks into her apartment and goes through her belongings and even steals some of them. He uses social media to track her every move and orchestrates the second run-in that leads them to becoming closer. I mentioned just Beck, but his stalking goes far beyond that. He stalks many of the people he comes across. When you compare Ted and Joe, both characters follow their love interests and gather information to insert themselves into their interests' lives. The key difference is how it's framed. Joe is correctly framed as predatory, while Ted's behavior is romanticized. Number 2, they're both cheaters. Ted cheats emotionally throughout the series. He always holds out hope for Robin while he's with other women. While dating Victoria, he kisses Robin, and that's the one time he goes beyond emotional cheating and physically cheats. But throughout the show, he shows patterns of overlapping emotional investment. On the other hand, Joe cheats both emotionally and physically. In season 1, he cheats on Karen Minty with Beck. In season 3, he fantasizes about Marianne before he cheats on Love with her. And in season 5, he cheats on Kate with Bronte. Both Ted and Joe struggle with commitment and fidelity. Ted's cheating is mostly emotional, while Joe's is both emotional and physical. But overall, both can't be fully present in their relationships. Speaking of struggling with commitment, both of these men relationship hop. Ted is rarely ever single. He moves from one woman to the next. He's constantly either in a relationship or pursuing one. Over the course of a few years, he dates over 58 women in total. I think it's safe to say that that's more than the average person in just a few years. Sometimes he doesn't even remember the names of these women. On the other hand, Joe doesn't date as many women, but he moves on from one fairly serious relationship to the next pretty quickly. He moves from Candace to Beck to Love to Marianne in quick succession. When one relationship ends, sometimes because he's unalived someone, he immediately starts obsessing over the next woman. He says each new love interest is different from the last, but his patterns just repeat themselves. Who does that remind you of? Ted. Both Ted and Joe relationship hop and use new relationships to avoid self-reflection. Neither of them takes enough time to reflect on previous relationships before jumping onto the next. You can even say that they use relationships to run from themselves. While we're talking about running from yourself, both of these guys are delusional. Ted and Joe lie to themselves, I tell you. They are both incredibly unreliable narrators. Ted narrates his past with obvious bias. He convinces himself he's a hopeless romantic, rather than acknowledging that he's actually problematic. He also tells himself that his grand gestures are romantic when they actually cross boundaries. On the other hand, Joe's internal monologue shows self-deception. He unalives people while convincing himself he's protecting his love interests or that they made him do it. He reframes his actions so that they appear as devotion when he is actually being very controlling. When you compare the two, both characters are unreliable narrators of their own lives. They reframe their toxic behaviors as romantic or even justified, refusing to acknowledge their own faults. Ted does this as he's combing through the past, while Joe does this as he's thinking in real time. Moving on, both men are manipulative. Ted manipulates situations to make them look spontaneous when they're actually calculated. He also tries to make Robin feel guilty for not wanting the same things he does. He uses grand romantic gestures to walk all over women's boundaries, like when he insisted on dating Stella even though she'd said it was unethical for her. Or when he pursued Natalie a second time and brings her a giant sock monkey. P.S. She loves sock monkeys, even though she wanted nothing to do with him, only to break up with her a few weeks later because he just doesn't think she's the one. Joe is also a master manipulator. He stages run-ins, manipulates Beck's writing and friendships, plays victim to gain sympathy, and literally frames others for his crimes. Although Joe's manipulation is far more dangerous, both men have manipulative tendencies. Both guys pretend to be nice guys and play victim. They pretend to be sensitive or misunderstood in order to make people feel and do what they want. The next similarity is both are obsessed with the idea of the one.
Well, hello there. Who are you?
Turns to his buddy and says, "See that girl? I'm gonna marry her someday."
In How I Met Your Mother, the entire sitcom is centered on Ted's obsession with finding the one, or the mother. He projects the ideal relationship onto every woman he meets and creates this fantasy that there's a perfect woman out there for him. Similarly, Joe becomes instantly obsessed with his love interests. He's obsessed over Beck, Love, Marianne, Kate, and Bronte, convincing himself that each one of them was his soulmate. How many soulmates can one guy have? Like Ted, he projects an ideal onto every woman and ignores their actual personalities. Building on this, the final similarity is that both men don't truly want love. Joe literally didn't want love, as in Love Quinn. But anyway, both chase an idealized fantasy rather than accepting real people. Despite claiming to want love, Ted sabotages all his relationships. He chases unavailable women like Robin and panics when Stella tries to make plans with him only months in advance. When Victoria seems like she might be the ideal woman, he cheats. And when Natalie accepts him again, he breaks up with her just because it just doesn't feel right. He wants the chase, not love. In Joe's case, Joe wants possession and control, not genuine love. When Love, as in Love Quinn, reveals she's equally sick and accepts him fully, he starts to despise her rather than being grateful. When Kate uses her power and influence to cover Joe's tracks and give him a fresh start, he falls out of love with her within a few years into their marriage. He wants to be the hero and doesn't actually care about finding true love or acceptance. Comparing them, Ted wants the romantic story, while Joe wants control, but they both don't want real love like they claim to. So there's my case for why Ted Mosby and Joe Goldberg are extremely similar. The main difference is the framing of their behaviors and the degree to which they engage in them. Ted is in a sitcom where his behaviors are softened and romanticized, while Joe exists in a psychological thriller where the same behaviors are correctly portrayed as dangerous. Both Ted and Joe are obsessive and violate boundaries in their pursuits. They are both unable to accept real women versus their fantasies, and they are both manipulative, nice guys. Putting aside the difference in the severity of their actions, both men show problematic tendencies. I'm going to make a bold argument and say that in another life, and with a little more trauma, Ted Mosby could have become a Joe Goldberg.